True creepy ghost encounters. Dear HS1, I've been listening to creepy stories online for about a year now, and have debated to share my own story or not with the world yet. Also, HS1, sorry if my words and sentences seems to not make sense. I'll try my best, but you can always use your own. So, I'm just gonna go ahead and write it out on the email, and at the end, well, we'll see if it gets sent. A little bit about myself. I have an older sister and a younger sister. I'm 3 years younger than my older sister, and 3 years older than my younger sister. Makes sense? In the 90s growing up, we lived in a one-level rancher type house. This is a very traumatizing and creepy and very true experience that happened to me and my sister when we were kids. And I still have a very hard time sleeping at night, and I'm now 26 years old. This started when I was about 8 years old or so, and my sister about 6, and my older sister being 11 or 12. Me and my younger sister shared rooms when we were kids. Every night, I would have to take her to the bathroom if she woke up in the middle of the night, because she was really scared to go by herself. I mean, really scared. I would have to stand half awake outside the door halfway open so she could go without being scared. This would really piss me off, but I could always hear the fear in her voice when I refused to take her, and always end up feeling bad when she's getting really scared of the dark. Anyways, this all started as I can remember one night when I was sleeping in bed and awake to my name being whispered in a low voice, getting louder and louder. Eventually, to screaming my name in my ears. I was so scared and ran out of bed. I ran to the door to my older sister's room, knowing it was just me and her home alone that night. My parents and my younger sister were gone that night. Anyways, I run to her room, only to see her door open and light turned off, and her not in there, and that's when I hear the TV in the living room. I run to her in tears, saying her name, and she was sitting down watching TV. I look at the clock and it says 12:30 a.m. She said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "I woke up to hearing my name being whispered and then screaming in my ear," as I almost started to cry. She looked at me all weird and was just like, "Lay out here with me. Mom and Dad should be home soon." As I lay there, I can feel my head and neck hot, and somehow I drifted off to only waking up to my mom feeling my head and neck, saying I had a fever. My mom told me to get up and head to bed, while she was gonna bring me some medicine at this point. I was not feeling good at all. I took the medicine and passed out and forgot about the whole ordeal. The next morning, feeling better, and remembering what took place the night before, I just figured it was my imagination, since I had a fever. But little did I know that was not the case. It continued to happen almost every night. Some nights, I would get up and go to the bathroom to splash some cold water in my face, and just be terrified, standing there as it would stop, and I would head back to bed. I couldn't understand what was happening and never mentioned anything to anyone. Then, one day, it just all stopped. I found myself sleeping peacefully, except when I had to take my little sister to the bathroom, that is, of course. Maybe about a few months had passed, and it was bedtime. And me and my little sister were laying in bed talking, and couldn't sleep, and we were just talking about random stuff, and an hour or two went by. Everyone else was now sleeping in the house. As we continued to lay there, restless, looking around our room, chatting away in whispers, and then we both stopped talking, and I found myself looking at our door, which wasn't shut all the way, because we would hang towels on our room door, which would prevent it from shutting all the way. We had a queen-size bed that we shared, and was set up in the middle of our room facing our door. Our door was a little to the left. Anyways, I found myself looking at our door, trying to make out what the hell was standing there or who was standing there. My sister grabbed my hand and she was like, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" As she came all the way to my side of the bed, holding on to my arm. As my eyes adjusted, I was horrified to actually see what I was looking at. It was a woman wearing a white gown or dress with big, long, curly hair down to her waist. But I couldn't see her face. It was blurred out or dotted out or blacked out. She was standing right there in between the crack of the door, which was probably just 3 to 4 inches open. I know for a fact I wasn't dreaming. As for my sister, I can see her as well. We both got under our covers, terrified and scared shitless, not wanting to move or even make a frickin' sound. We were basically trapped in our room because the thing was standing at the door just watching us. We didn't know what to do but to hide under the blankets for what seemed like hours, getting really hot and sweaty, and couldn't take it anymore. I decided to peek out of the covers, not knowing what I will see. And as I peeked out slowly, I only found I was able to see my hallway through the crack, and not some disgusting looking woman with no face. My sister asked if she could come out now, in a voice of terror. I said, "Yes, sister, come out." My little sister is still hanging on to me and said, now I know I wasn't seeing things, because she told me that she had seen the lady before, and that's why she was so scared to use the bathroom at night. We just laid there terrified and frozen in fear and confused to what we had just encountered. This incident continued to happen throughout the years on some random nights. Sometimes she'd be on the ceiling right above us and just taunting us and whispering our names louder and louder. We never told our parents about what happened until we were adults, and after we moved out of that house a few years later. It seemed to stop, and my older sister never experienced anything like that. But that feeling of being watched always stuck with me, and other weird incidences happened throughout my life, but that's another can of worms altogether. My sister and I will talk about what happened to us from time to time and tell others about it, and my sister even saw her one last time when she was 18 years old, just for a split second in our second home. But I never saw that woman again, and I hope to never see her again because she fucked up my sleeping nights forever. Anyways, sorry for the long story, and if it didn't make sense, I didn't want to add any names to the story, but if you want to, you could. Fort SILOSO. Many years ago, I visited Fort SILOSO at Sentosa with my dad and our visitor from overseas. The 4 of us, my dad, my uncle, which was the visitor, my cousin, and me were in a good mood as we were touring Sentosa by the monorail. The monorail was still in operations back then. My dad and uncle were interested in war stuff, so we decided to stop at Fort SILOSO to take a look at the buildings and cannons there. Everything was pretty good as we climbed around the Fort SILOSO and took pictures with the cannons around. But finally, we decided to go and walk the underground bunk. It was really hot outside, but the moment we went in, it was like the air conditioning was turned on. Which is really weird because I couldn't see any air conditionings around. But I had to do the stupid thing and start to stare at all the dark corners on the long bunk to see if I can spot any air conditioners. Barely 20 steps into the tunnel, I realized someone or something was watching me. All the hairs on my body was raised. I scanned around the bunk. There were tourists in front of us, but they were talking and looking around. My dad and uncle were busy talking with my cousin. The feeling of being stared at was getting harder to ignore, and the vibes I was getting from that thing or person was not was not pleased with me. I started to turn around to find the source to pinpoint the area where the person or thing was. I couldn't see anything in the dark bunk, but I could sense a presence at one dark corner. I wanted to run and scream at this moment, as I can sense the anger and resentment in the stare. But yet, I felt silly, so I just fastened my pace and let my dad and uncle catch up with me. When we finally exit the tunnel, my dad turned and looked at me and said, "Why are you so pale? You look like you saw a ghost." I was close to tears at this moment, but I figured if the presence did nothing to me, I better pray and ask for forgiveness. So as we all walked away, I started to chant a little Buddhist prayer and ask for forgiveness. That was the end of the story then. A few years later, I went back to Sentosa to do camping with my friends, and we started to explore the different areas of the island. Still, I refused to go to Fort SILOSO. We came along this old building that's like bunks or classrooms or something like that. It was empty, and strangely, all the windows and doors were wide open. We were just walking past it when I got that feeling of being watched again. Without saying much, I whispered to my friend to start walking very fast. When they heard the urgency of my voice, they started walking very fast, but very silently with me. All the time, I was chanting the Buddhist chant. Suddenly, without warning, a few of the doors of the building started to bang shut. At that moment, all my friends started to run. I hesitate and look back. There was no wind blowing that afternoon. The trees around barely moved. But I saw a few doors bang shut on their own and open again. Needless to say, that was the last time I visited that area. But today, I can't recall where this building was. Does anyone? Scary story about the mental institution. Hey HS1, just wanted to send a story your way, in hopes that you'll use it in one of your videos. Keep up the awesome videos, man. I consider myself an urban explorer, and I love walking through old and abandoned buildings. There's just something about the history that makes it awesome to go through. Well, let me tell you, I came across a jewel. In Petersburg, Virginia, just outside the center of the city, there's a Central State Mental Institution. It's one of 3 that are found throughout the state, aside from Western State in Staunton, Virginia, and Eastern State. Central State had an odd beginning. It first started off as a recuperation center for recently freed African American slaves following the Civil War. As time went on, the center eventually became a hospital for African Americans, until it was dubbed the name Central State Lunatic Asylum for the criminally black insane. It stayed open until 1984, I believe, when the new facility opened up only a stone's throw away from the oldest standing remnants of the asylum. Most of the old faculty is locked down tight. The police regularly patrol the area, and when I laid eyes on this building, I knew I just had to get in. So after a week of planning, I got into my truck and made the half-hour drive. I parked my truck in the staff parking lot and made the half-mile walk down a gravel road, lined on either side by tall willow trees. I hopped the stone wall and proceeded into the courtyard of the institute. I undid my backpack and pulled out the battery-powered sawzall that I bought with me, and cut off the wooden boards that held the front door in place. And after a few good kicks, the door gave way. Now it was about 10:30 at night, and I was all by myself doing this, but I wasn't too nervous. I get into this mind frame that gets my blood going, and I walk inside slowly, shutting the door behind me. I produced my flashlight and began walking around. Seeing the place in disarray that it was, old patient papers laying strewn about, name badges, coats, and one straitjacket that I found were all scattered around the floor. For about an hour I walked around, soaking in all the history that was in these walls. Around midnight, that was when things started getting horrifying. I found the doorway that led downstairs to the morgue, the autopsy room, and the furnace room. It was about 30 degrees cooler than anywhere else, and it was a sweltering 80 outside in the summer. As I panned my flashlight around, I suddenly felt eyes practically drilling into the back of my skull. Starting to get slightly creeped out, I slowly began making my way back up to the stairwell. That's when I saw it. A massive black shadow, at least 8 feet tall. No light from my flashlight passed through it. My God, I was mortified by it. I almost thought I was going to faint. It wavered there for a minute or two before it vanished right in front of me. Needless to say, I screamed like the biggest 6'5", 300-pound bitch I was and trucked it out of there at Mach 10. I hauled it up the stairs, down the corridor, and into the main lobby, and out the front doors into the strong, caring arms of the Petersburg police, who promptly arrested me. The hospital staff must have called them based on my truck, a 98 GMC pickup truck that they had never seen before. While they were talking to me, one of them asked if that was me that they heard a scream while they waited for me. I told him what had happened, and he went kind of white. He told me that on one of his patrols round past the hospital one night, he had spotted what appeared to be an enormous black mass standing at one of the windows on the 4th floor. In the end, I was slapped with a trespassing charge, a quiet night in a cell, and a $350 fine and a felony charge threat if I was found on the property again without permission. Hell, don't worry about it. Whatever the hell was in there, I'll be damned and a half if I ever go back in there again. A haunting in male ward. I was doing night duty in the male ward in Newcastle Province Hospital in South Africa. With me was the ward sister and myself, which was a staff nurse and the nurse. We weren't so busy that night. We had 4 wards with 6 beds each in them, then 2 side wards without en-suite and 2 with en-suite. The front 2 wards were full, and the first 2 side wards, each side ward flanking the open duty door. It was a funny day to start with. I was asleep in my flat for my night shift for the week. It was about 2:30 p.m. that I woke up with a bang in my room. I couldn't understand what was going on as no windows were open to close out the noise from outside. Half asleep, I looked around and tried to see what caused the noise. I found out soon enough. On the carpet on the right-hand side of my bed end lied a heart-shaped little photo holder. I looked down at this thing and wondered how did it get to where it landed, as it was on my small portable TV in front of the bed. As I said, no wind blew and that thing had been standing there for ages. I looked down and with a shock, I realized the face in that photo was not the face of the person who was in that frame. It looked hideous, like an evil grin. I got such a shock and crawled right into bed again, eventually falling asleep. When I came on duty that night, I asked the sister in charge where Mr. So-and-so was. She said he passed away. I asked her what time. Lo and behold, it was the same time that the frame flew off the TV in my room. I felt a bit creeped out. She looked at me and asked me if I was okay. I told her what happened. She just gave me a funny look and shrugged it off as a coincidence, right? I felt differently about it. It was later that night, after all the work was done for the night, that we settled down in the open duty room. There was a smaller room where the floor sister used to sit in the daytime. The nurse sat behind the door as you came in from the duty room from the front part. The sister sat opposite her, and I sit with my back towards the other door leading to the back wards. From where I sat, I could see if someone was about to come into the ward. I was busy with some stats for the night, writing down in the patient's files when I did their rounds or charged their drips, etc., while sister did the ward stats for the night. It must have been around midnight or just after that something caught the corner of my eye. I saw that the nightlight about bed 3 was on. Through the curtains of the closed door, I did not think anything of it. It was about 5 minutes later when I looked again and it was off. I thought it was funny, but I didn't say anything. I realized the ward was empty, as all the patients were moved up to the first 2 wards. Eventually, I finished my paperwork and looked up again and the light went on again. Now it freaked me out. I mentioned it to the other 2 and they were very curious what was going on in the ward. I was on high alert by now, as the light went off again. It could not have been a malfunction of the lights, as the whole side would have done that, right? We watched in anticipation to see when the light will go off again, and it did. Me, being religious, thought this was very uncanny. The sister and the nurse became scared and said I must go in there to do something like a prayer or something. I refused, but when this light went on and off most of the early morning hours, I decided to wake up a priest who was one of our patients in the second side ward just next to me. He was half blind, but a gentle old soul. He told me not to be afraid and to go in there and just pray. As I went out of his room, I swear, I could smell something like sulfur. Again, that light went on and off the whole night. At 5 a.m. in the morning, we woke the patients for medications and bed baths, etc. We handed out the coffees and teas, and after we had all our cup of coffee, I said I'll be brave enough to go in there by myself. As I came into the ward, I heard a swishing sound to my right and saw that the fan on the cupboard was blowing full force. I turned it off. I went to that bed and started praying. After I pulled open the curtains, I felt very funny. Then, I went out and did the patient's reports in my wards that was allocated to me, and I was just busy with the last report. When I saw the day sister come on duty, I waited for all of them to come on duty, then I asked them about the ward. I immediately realized that the dead man was in that bed before they moved him out on the 4th ward, right at the back, the only one open. The day staff were astounded to hear what happened during the night. The one nurse said, after they moved the patients, she was standing there looking out to the gate. At the bottom, the ward was on 4th floor. Because there was some drama with the security shouting, etc., she felt someone come to sit on the bed behind her. Thinking it was one of the nurses, also wanting to see what was going on, and as she turned around, there was an imprint, but no one was sitting on the bed. She also said she put the fan off herself before we came on duty. It was ward policy. When a ward was not in use, the lights in the ward and every other appliance should be switched off. I told the day sister it was a coincidence again. She started to smile and shook her head. She could not believe what happened. The next night, female ward was full and asked us to admit this patient of theirs. She'll go to their ward as soon as a bed opens up. Our 3rd ward had men in it, so we could not place her in there. Sister and myself walked over to the 4th floor, and it was opposite the 4th side ward. What did we find? The light in that side ward was burning, when it wasn't even on before. I just told sister I'll leave that light on and I'm not going in there anymore. We admitted the female in the 4th ward that night, and we never touched that light in the 4th side ward and did not say a word about it to day staff when they came on duty the next morning.